Welcome to another episode of The Last Zebra. I'm your host, Ugo Ezama. And as always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share. And today I have a very special guest, Dr. Chantal Simons?
Simons.
Yes. Dr. Chantal Simons. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We got acquainted just a few minutes ago, really.
True.
But we know a very special mutual friend to both of us, Dr. Tonya Jones and Dr. Gloria Jones. Shout out to them for setting this up for us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. That open-ended question is actually one that is always challenging to answer because there's so many directions that you could go. But I tend to tell people to work on their narrative, so I'm going to try and practice what I preach here. So my full name is F.A. Chantal Ghani Simons, but I do go by Chantal, in case anyone's wondering. I grew up in Ghana, had a wonderful childhood, moved to the United States for college, went to Yale for undergrad. I was a French and chemistry double major, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my life because I got to use both parts of my brain and really interact with the science world, but still keep the humanities and keep that connectedness. I also was pre-med during that time, so you can imagine it was a lot. But I was living my best life, was very engaged socially and, doing the thing in terms of academics. Went to med school in New York. I went to Mount Sinai. Again, great experience. I always thought I was going to be a geriatrician. I knew I was going to go into medicine. I was going to go into geriatrics and palliative care. That was my calling, or so I thought. Then fell in love with surgery. And this is a crisis moment because in my mind, a surgeon could not be a parent, but I wanted to be a parent. So what was that going to look like? Ultimately, I found urology, so urological surgery, and it ended up for a variety of reasons, which we can explore if you would like to chat about it.
Yeah, of course.
I ended up deciding that would be the best home for me. So fast forward a number of years, I went to UCLA where I completed my urologic surgery training. It was a 6-year program. And as probably Dr. Tonya Jones has shared with you, it was rough, but we survived. We did the thing. And currently I'm a fellow at the University of Michigan. So I'm doing a fellowship in something called neuro-urology and pelvic reconstructive surgery. And it's a very niche kind of surgical field, but absolutely love what I do. I love my patients. I enjoy work. And outside of that, I'm getting a master's in health professions education. And with that, my focus is basically creating space at the table for people who have never historically had access. So trying to understand barriers to entry into a career like medicine, more specifically a career in surgery or in urologic surgery for people who look like me. So people who identify as underrepresented in medicine, people coming from low income backgrounds, and people who identify as being first generation students, trying to understand what makes it so difficult for them to be in a place such as the one that I occupy. Why am I a unicorn in this place? What kinds of barriers exist? And what are the facilitators so we can ensure that there is more representation in the kinds of echelons that we tend to occupy here in higher medicine? So that's kind of my professional story. But more importantly, I'm a mom. I have a 1-year-old and she's awesome. And I am a proud wife. I have the best husband. My husband is my favorite half, as I like to call him.
Your favorite half?
My favorite half.
I love that. Is he in medicine as well?
Heck no. There could not be 2 physicians in my household. I'm already type A and very tightly wound. I can fake a chill, but my husband is my grounding force. He pulls me back to earth. He's my balance.
That's amazing.
And I could not be with someone in medicine. It just wouldn't work. Which is great because I love him he's for me.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. There's a lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack there.
So presenting you like a little taste and you tell me where you want to go.
Let's start with Ghana.
Yeah.
So you moved from Ghana to undergrad here in the US, and that was Yale.
That was Yale.
Wow. What was that like? What was that transition like? How was Ghana, first of all?
Okay.
And then growing up in Ghana. So I'm assuming you came here late teens, early 20s for undergrad,
correct.
Right? So early childhood, to go from to come from Ghana, forming your idea that you wanted to do pre-med, French, and chemistry. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
To do all of that.
Yeah. That's why I told you it's a complicated story. So I grew up in a single parent home, and my mother is the OG boss lady. She's someone who carved away when there was no way. She actually was born into wealth, but unfortunately her father passed away when she was 6, and suddenly they had nothing. And so she got to watch her mother carve out a life, a woman who had no education, carve out a life for herself such that she was able to send her children out to other countries to get educated. So my mother had the opportunity to move to the United Kingdom, get educated, and she decided to come back to Ghana to start a life. And so that's where I grew up. I have a brother, so there's 2 of us, and my mother instilled in us this understanding that there was nothing that was not possible for us. So I didn't get spanked much, but the one thing I got spanked for is if I said, I can't. I was not allowed to use those words. So I could never not see myself occupying a role. There was nothing that was too high for me to achieve. The flip side of that too was I was not too big to do anything. So couldn't get all up in your head thinking that you're so good or you're so big that you can't do X.
Right.
So it was a fine balance between humility and the audacity to believe that you could be anything you wanted to be. And growing up, I lived with my mother and my grandmother, who suffered a stroke when I was 9. So at that point, she needed a caregiver, and my mother is deathly afraid of hospitals because of her how her father passed away. So what ended up happening is at the age of 9, I became my grandmother's primary caregiver. I gave her meds. I went to her doctor's appointments. And you can imagine being a 9-year-old when we go to the hospital and they're asking questions. It's also a very male-dominated society. Yeah. So first and foremost, the doctors probably wanted to speak to a man, one.
Right.
So they had this woman and this girl, and they would address my mother, oftentimes not with much respect. And she would tell them to address me, which made them even more mad. You want me to talk to the 9-year-old about your mother's plan? And my mom was like, yes. So I got quickly very versatile with communicating with people who had way more authority than myself. I could fake it till you make it. You wouldn't know I was 9.
Right.
But I was very much involved in her care till she passed away. And so for me, I thought, this is my calling, taking care of someone who was in a similar situation as my grandmother. But I had the opportunity to kind of test that, because once my grandmother passed away, my mother said to her friends who had parents in Ghana who didn't live in Ghana, she said, oh, don't worry, Chantal, I'll take care of your mothers too. So my last 2 years of college, I had 3 older women. I also called them grandmas. I had 3 grandmas. My grandma at this point had passed away, and I was taking them I was doing their doctor's appointments, checking in on them before I went to school or after school. And it was just my thing. I was good at it. So fast forward to the point where I had to decide about colleges. I was always pretty brilliant at school. I'm not going to underplay it, because I think women oftentimes undersell themselves. I was really good academically. It was just something that came naturally to me, and I enjoyed it. And there's no shame in that. So I knew that I was going to go into something that was related to caring for others, because beyond being like a brain box is what people used to call me, I love taking care of people. That is ultimately, I think, the thing that God has put me on earth to do, to be a caregiver. So I thought I was going to do medicine. And funny story, I initially had thought I was going to go to the UK to do so, following in my mother's footsteps. My mother was not a physician, but she had gone to the UK. So I moved to the UK when I was 15, with the understanding that I was going to do my last 2 years of high school and transition to university. That would ensure that I had access to grants. Did a couple of weeks and I was like, I want to go back to Ghana. So when I moved back to Ghana, my mother said to me, if you're staying here, if you're not going to go get those scholarships, you best believe you have to get a scholarship to go to the United States, because that education is really expensive. I was like, I didn't know what that meant, because I didn't have an understanding of the stats to get into schools. All of that was a foreign concept. I just knew I was smart. I worked hard. I'm going to apply. Surely it should work. So I had 10 institutions, didn't know much about them. They just happened to be institutions that people from my high school had gotten into. And the counselor at our school said, yeah, that looks like a reasonable list. I applied to 10. I actually got into all 10. And I was trying to decide between Yale and Stanford. Those were my top 2. So my mother said, I'll go visit those schools for you, and then I come kind of give you the lowdown, because I couldn't leave school to go visit.
Right.
She landed in New York. She went to Yale first, and she said, that's where you're going to go. So she canceled all the other institutions. And so that's where I went. And I had a phenomenal experience in college.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I know that was a long-winded answer, but
I think one of my favorite things you said is at the beginning when you were describing how there's nothing you can't do, the duplicity of that statement.
Yeah.
Right? You're not too big for something, but everything is also available for you. I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Is that where the accent came from? The 2 weeks in UK?
I was born in the UK. I did say. So we moved to Ghana. Then we moved. Yeah. So I've moved around.
Gotcha. All right. So you get to Yale. Culture shock?
No, I should have mentioned also, I traveled very extensively as a child.
Oh, good.
And the idea, again, was it wasn't because we were financially balling. My mother recognized that it was important for us to be able to interact with people from different parts of the world, seeing people in their own spaces, having an appreciation for different cultures. So most summers we would go somewhere new, and she would say, as long as if I've got my 2 kids, I hold one on one side, hold one on the other side, and we can go see the world. So I traveled very extensively. Before I moved to the US for college, I'd already been to 33 states.
Wow.
And I'd been all over Europe. She sometimes, before this was, I don't know if it's illegal, but as a kid, she would sometimes go to the destination first and have my brother and I come on our own, and she'd meet us on the other side. She wanted us to be able to learn how to navigate airports on our own in case something happened to her. Because I think, again, this fear of loss of a parent was something that continued to weigh on her, and she wanted us to be able to learn how to navigate the world independently. So I'd been to the US. I was like, I know how to do this thing. I got this. But she stayed for 3 months. So she didn't stay with me in college. She stayed in a neighboring town with an aunt. Every Saturday she came over. She made me jollof.
Hey.
She went to Costco. She got me this chocolate cake. My freshman 15 was from that chocolate cake. And then she left. And I'd gotten into this routine where every day after my chemistry class, I was coming down Science Hill, I called my mom and just gave her the lowdown on what was going on that day. And now I had no one to call because of the time difference. And that's when it hit me. 3 months in, my mother had left. And I remember calling her once. I was like, yeah, Mommy, I changed my mind. I want to come back. She's like, no, it doesn't work. So that was when it hit me.
You played that trick already.
You've done it once. Yeah. No. So, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. It's interesting to me that I think we share this, certainly. My mom came with me when I started college. I went to Nicholls State, down the bayou from here, about an hour away from here. And my mom came with me as well. And they had, that's when Domino's had the 555 deal back in the day. And that's what we ate. Nice. I guess that would be our chocolate cake. And I think that was definitely one of my it's one of those core memories I have with my mom. It's something so simple, and she was there with me for that process.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. Jollof rice.
Yes. Let's not get into it. It will not go well.
I mean, we know the answer, right?
Yeah, we do. I'm confident we do.
Yeah. What? So back to Yale then.
Yeah.
French. Is Ghana one of the? Because I know Cameroon is. Is Ghana a French colony or previous?
It's not. There's a story there. There's a story everywhere you poke. You're gonna get a story.
Tell me.
So I went to a British school in Ghana. So we followed the IGCSE curriculum. So most students, your last 2 years of high school, took three subjects. I took 4, and I had chosen chemistry, math, biology, and French because I liked French. I enjoyed it. And I always knew that using that side of my brain was important to me. I show up. So I'd gone to England, and then I came back, and I came in a little later than the rest of the class. The principal had changed my chemistry to physics, and he said, because you're going to be a physician and you don't need French, you need physics.
What?
So I was so annoyed. I was like, can he do that? Actually, he can, because that was the kind of world that they run. But when I got to college, my stance was, I'm going to show him, I'm going to be a French major and be fluent. And that's what I did. So I was a French major, but I love the sciences and I love chemistry. So I was a French and chemistry double major. The thing they don't tell you in college is if you're going to double major, you want to choose topics that have some overlap so you don't have an entire panel of classes you have to take for one, an entire panel for the other, and then you throw in the pre-med. So my course schedule, my course load was not the lightest. And then on top of that, I studied abroad for a semester, and some of my credits didn't even count for my French major. So it was a lot. And in all of that, I think this is kind of relevant because it kind of shows where my head was at. When I got into Yale, I thought I had gotten into medical school.
Oh.
Because everywhere else in the world,
Exactly.
you go straight into a professional school. So when I was leaving Ghana, I said, farewell, people. I'm going to medical school. I shall be back and I'll be a doctor. And I got a full scholarship, so I have no loans. So I'll be back right away.
Right.
It took me a year to realize I was pre-med. And that's not because people didn't try to tell me. They kept calling me pre-med, but I was like, oh, that's cute. I'm not pre-anything because I'm doing this medicine thing.
I'm med.
Yes, exactly. But because I knew I was going to be a chemistry major, I happened to be taking a lot of chemistry classes. So I was meeting the requirements. I just didn't know it. And a year into it, I was like, I finally realized, no, you have to apply. Your scholarship doesn't go over. And they don't tend to take international students. That was such a shock for me because it was the first time I was like, oh, I can't. The word that I never used, you told me I can't do this because I'm going to be applying to medical school as an international. So I'm going to be requesting a visa and I will not be eligible for any scholarships or loans because I'm not an American citizen. And it was the first time that I felt that it was, for a second, it didn't last long, that I wasn't going to be able to go in this path. And I think I looked up finance jobs that afternoon. I was like, who am I kidding? I can't take care of people doing finance. So then we had to do some maneuvering, but
Where did you go to medical school?
I went to Mount Sinai, New York.
Right. And so that was another 4 years, not too far from Yale.
Correct.
About an hour, 2 hours away?
An hour and a half, 90 minutes by train, straight shot.
Yeah. I had an interview at Yale for, what was it, residency maybe?
Okay.
It had to have been residency.
It's a magical place.
It is?
Yale, you said?
I felt overwhelmed.
No, so the college was a magical place. If you were into Harry Potter, it just felt like Hogwarts. It was just the feel of the place, the community, great support for folks who are not from there. They're very intentional.
Yeah.
I think once you're an international and you finish college and they've put you on all their like posters and their booklets, they're like, okay, that was cute. Go back to your country. And I say this because when I discovered that pre-med was a thing, I met with the pre-med officer. I was like, okay, let's catch up. Let's, figure out this game plan. I was kindly told that, if you want to do medicine, you need to go back to your home country and do it there because there's no path for internationals. To which I said, thank you very much. I appreciate your perspective. And I never went back to that office. So I had to figure out the application process on my own, which posed its own challenges, but we did it. But the college was warm. Well, I did a sub-internship there many, many years later for urology, and it was a very different feel. And I'm glad I did the sub-internship because if I hadn't, I would have assumed that the Yale of my university experience was what the Yale of my medical experience would be, and that wasn't the case.
What is that difference? What's that difference that you experienced? And it might be what I felt, but I didn't have something to juxtapose it to.
Yeah. The Yale of my university experience had a lot of people who looked like me. I had community. I had people who cared about the things I was passionate about. I did a lot of advocacy work in undergrad, and we started this organization for African professionals that was hosted on campus. So there was a lot of shared connection, shared goals, shared vision. And even the people who didn't have a shared heritage with me were curious about me as a person. So I learned how to ski at Yale because my college roommate, that's what they're into. And they're like, come, let me show you. And they were like, can I come to Ghana? I was like, yeah, let's go. So I took people to Ghana. One of my deans came with me to Ghana once.
That's amazing.
So there was a curiosity about my humanity in a way that made me feel like, oh, actually, I'm a full person here. And it almost felt like was different, but I felt a connectedness similar to what I felt at home. And then once college was done and I went off into the real America, that was lost. So that was the difference, I think. You know, there's a lot of nostalgia in thinking about Yale. And I'm glad I didn't go there from any part of my medical training, because I think it would have broken down that memory of, you know, how special of a place it was to me.
Was that then your first real culture shock then, that transition from Yale to real America?
I would say I don't know that it was much of a shock, because again, medical school, you're still in a bubble.
That's true.
So I was living in New York, and you know, everyone's like, "Hey, New York, New York." I was in class or I wasn't quite living. The moments where I branched out into the real America, if you will, was to serve at church. So I attended a church called Hillsong Church, and I remember initially I was attending as you know, a congregant. I didn't talk to anyone. I went in and went out because I remember this prayer that I would say. I was like, God, you brought me here to do medical school, so you understand that I'm just like, you know, I'm just going to keep my head down. I can't do anything. And one of my roommates said, I think we should serve. I was like, yeah, but God knows we don't have time for that. And she came into my room one day with a laptop, and she was like, I'm not leaving till we sign up to serve for something. And I was like, fine. And I tell her all the time that was one of the biggest gifts she gave me, because once I started serving, I got connected to people in New York who had nothing to do with medicine. And how refreshing to hear people not talk about like the exam and be distressed because they got a B instead of an A minus, you know, just perspective building, and seeing again this idea of meeting people from different walks of lives. That was such a blessing, and I had the privilege of experiencing that for a good 2.5 years of my time at Yale. So in Mount Sinai.
That's amazing. That's amazing. As I'm hearing you talk, and I remember as you were doing your intro, how you toggled to urology, right?
Yeah.
I made my decision by kicking down the big decision, kicking it down the field. So medical school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like, let me do internal medicine. That'll buy me some time.
Yeah.
I knew what I didn't like.
That's important.
And I think that has been a saving grace. So I knew I couldn't do surgery.
Okay.
I loved surgery. I really did. I thought for a very long time I would be a surgeon to some capacity. I did my surgery rotation, and the hours were, for my personality, I'm a very, I think I'm very relaxed, laid back. And you know, the typical surgeon.
Well.
Respectfully, of course. I do love my surgeons. I felt like where I did my rotation, and I think that's also important. Yes. It's important who you meet.
Yes.
When you meet them, where you meet them.
Absolutely.
The people that kind of shape the decisions you make, especially when it comes to medicine and how you navigate through your chosen profession in medicine.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I did it's also called Mount Sinai, but this was in Sinai. It's in Baltimore.
Okay.
And it was intense. And I'm not saying intense in a way that's only like negative, because intense is rightful. I think in medicine, exposure is what you need. You need to see. You have to see things.
Yes.
And you only see things if you're there to see them.
Correct.
And there is only a limited amount of time in the day, and patients don't wait for you to be ready.
Oh yeah.
Right? And surgery is the same way. So the hours were a lot. And I remember I was in a case, it was a vascular surgery case, right? And I don't know how many days I had been, not days, how many hours I had been on. It had to be like an hour and a day and some. So it was like an early case. It was a endarterectomy. And as I was standing there, I was assisting, like I just dozed off. No. Right? And my hand touched the sterile field. A part of a part of me that wasn't sterile touched the sterile field. And I remember the look of the surgeon's eyes, like, yeah, this one isn't for me. In my mind, I had a mental, like, I was like, this is it. And that was a moment for me, like, I'm genuinely exhausted, but I didn't feel like my exhaustion was worthwhile. I don't know if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, so surgery isn't for me.
Okay.
OB-GYN I couldn't do. I didn't feel comfortable in OB-GYN. Pediatrics was too much. The kids are precious, but a part of that rotation was there's a veil of you're really treating the parents. Mm-hmm. The kids are amazing, obviously. The kids are beautiful. So I kicked the decision down the line. Internal medicine, they'll buy me some more time.
Yeah.
And then I did the exact same process and landed on pulmonary critical care. So by process of elimination, I came to pulmonary and critical care, which is what I practice now. How did you come to urology? I'm
a very logical thinker when it comes to big decisions. I make all the Excel sheets and pros and cons. And then I think the final decision, oftentimes, it's like, well, why did you make the list anyway? So here's my thinking. I knew geriatrics and palliative care was very closely associated with the experience that I had taking care of my grandmothers. Mm-hmm. And then I got to Yale and I discovered a hospice my very first semester. And a hospice, for those who don't know, is a space where if someone has a diagnosis or a prognosis, the thinking that they may have 6 months or less to live, then they're eligible to stay in a space where we focus on comfort care and quality of life. I discovered one the very first semester at Yale, and it was actually the first hospice built in the United States. And I started volunteering there. So every Saturday, I used to go out Saturday night, so people thought that I was like, yeah, just going out and partying. But Saturday during the day, I was at hospice. And that time, again, is this idea of recognizing the gifts of life. I wasn't doing anything fancy. People think that when you want to like shadow medicine, like I want to scrub and do the surgery, or I want to like see patients and do the things. I was doing remember my mother said, nothing is above you, but you're above nothing.
You're right.
I was cleaning, changing people's diapers. I was feeding, I was taking out the trash. But mostly I was sitting with patients, particularly those who didn't have family at the end. I remember this one patient, the very first patient I took care of, and I saw her consistently every Saturday. And then one Saturday I went and she wasn't there. And that was devastating. But she made me, every Saturday when I went, we worked on a coloring book. And it took us, 3 months. We were still coloring that same page. But we were just coloring. We chose one color and we slowly colored. And then at the end, she gave it to me. So I had it on my wall in college for many years. But that experience solidified in my mind that this is it. This is what I'm going to do, geriatrics and palliative care. So I get to med school. That's what I do my research in. I found one of the most prominent thinkers in palliative care happened to be at Mount Sinai, Dr. Diane Meyer, who took me under her wing. I went to all the national conferences with her. I wrote papers with her. She was my mentor. But then the part of me that keeps, checklists and stuff was like, be open-minded in terms of allowing yourself to experience everything that is here. I also recognize that I've got 4 years in medical school. How many people in the world get to be in medical school? So I wanted to experience everything, even if I didn't go into that field. If I was on peds, you best believe I was going to be the best peds medical student because I get to do this. This is awesome. So every rotation, I threw myself in there and I was really leaning into it with gusto. But I was very intentional about keeping track of the things that excited me and the things that I was repelled by. I had an experience in OBGYN where an attending my very first day asked me if I wanted to come in with her at L&D, and then she swore at the patient, or she swore at me for not being able to assist her, and the patient was there, and I was like, this is her first baby and this is what she gets to hear. And I remember thinking to myself, that kind of toxicity, not for me. So over the course of my rotations, I was putting together all the things that elevated my spirit and really dampened my spirit in order for me to come up finally, when it wasn't intentional, I wasn't a grand plan. But finally, what that created was a checklist of the things I was willing to tolerate and the things I was seeking in my career. And then I did my surgery rotation, fell in love in the OR. So I get there and I might have been there for hours, but I didn't even notice.
I think that's it right there.
I did not notice. I did not notice time fly. And I loved the fact that I was on my feet and like doing stuff and engaged and not just sitting down. Loved it. But I loved every rotation, quite frankly.
Right.
But I had the opportunity now to test each specialty against my list that I had been compiling for the past 3 years at that point. So I decided on urology pretty late. But as I looked at my list, it's like, you say you like surgery, you like doing procedures, you like longitudinal relationships, you like working with the elderly, you like end-of-life care. You also want to do something that Ghana doesn't actually have much access to, because I always considered myself a conduit for resources for back home. And if I chose something that there is an abundance of, I don't get to be able to give back to the community that raised me in a meaningful way. That at least was my thinking. And then I did my homework. So I was like, okay, what specialty can allow me to do all of this? I actually then created selectives. We had the opportunity to do 2-week experiences, and I did every single surgical subspecialty except ortho. I looked at it and I was like, nah, I'm not an ortho chick. But everything else I tried. Yeah. And I was like, does this fit my list? Does this fit my list? Nah. And eventually I did urology, and I did my 2-week selective. And my very last day of the selective, one of the chief residents took a picture of me as I was closing skin. And I sent it to my mom and I was like, look at me go. And she was like, you're wearing your glasses. You must feel very comfortable there. Wow. And this was crazy because since age 11, when I got contact lenses, only the people in my house saw me in my glasses. I'm wearing glasses now because, reformed woman. But I had worn contact lenses every single time I stepped out of the house from age 11 till that rotation. Wow. And I hadn't even noticed that I had felt so comfortable in that space. And that's kind of when I knew that urology was what was the place for me. And eventually I learned more. It's such an expansive field. Every aspect of surgery we do, like we do robotics, we do, microscopic, we do open. There's just such a breadth of it. And I then was like, okay, can I find someone who looks like me, who can be my mentor? And there were none, because only 0.6% of urologists are Black women. Wow. 0.6%. Only at the time, only 9% of urologists were women, period. So there was a lack of role modeling for me, for someone who I could see and be like, oh, okay, yeah, it's possible because she did it. So I Googled. I Googled Black woman urologist. I found a woman in Kansas. Still never met her to the, actually, no, she just Zooms. Still never met her in person to this day. But I called her clinic, asked her clinic for her email address, because I said, hey, I'm a Black girl going into urology, don't have a mentor. Her secretary, or the person who picked up, was kind enough to actually give me an email address, which not everyone would have. Right. And I emailed her, explained my situation, and she read my essay and edited it and connected me with other people. She didn't know me anything, but that woman just saw something in me, or I don't know what it was, but I cannot underplay or overplay actually how impactful this idea of having someone believe that this was possible for me, especially in the context of having been told by my own medical school that, again, you're international, you're not going to match into a competitive specialty, so apply into internal medicine was what I was told. But, if that was what I wanted to do,
that's what you would have done.
That's what I would have done. And I said, thank you very much for your perspective. Didn't go back again.
I like that line.
Yeah.
I like that line.
Yeah.
I think she saw herself in you. She probably looked for someone like herself and couldn't find it. Yeah. That's beautiful. I think so much of, like I said earlier, so much of who we are is a reflection of those that end up being our mentors and end up being our attendings, right? So as you went through urology fellowship, were you able to meet some more?
In residency or in fellowship?
Residency, and you're in fellowship now, but residency as well as fellowship. Were you able to meet more Black women?
So I actually just gave a talk this weekend, yesterday here in New Orleans, and my talk was about self-advocacy.
Tell me more.
And I bring it up in the context of reaching out to individuals. The worst that happens is they don't respond. And so I was very intentional about reaching out and trying to find mentorship. And one way that I did this is, at the time, I mean, everyone was using Facebook. And I went through, they had a Black doctors, I can't remember the name of the group now.
Is it why
bad?
Yeah,
yes.
Young,
Young Black, yes.
Yeah.
I went through, and at that time, there were hundreds of people in the group. I went through every single picture on there and then looked at every single specialty, found all the Black people, and I DM'd every single Black person on that why bad. And some of them responded, some didn't. I set up conversations just to learn people's stories and glean any wisdom that I could gather. So that was the application period. And I actually was very blessed. I went to UCLA, and UCLA had 2 Black women who were faculty, one of whom became a mentor to me. She came to my wedding. She just mailed some books to my kid this week. And my chief resident, who I'm actually visiting here in New Orleans, who became one of the groomsmen at my wedding and also the godfather to my child.
What?
Yeah. So
good man.
He's the best man. Yeah. After my husband.
He's also in medicine. So.
He's also in medicine, true. And let's see, who else in terms of Black community? I was very aggressive about recruitment. So by the time I left, we had 1 Black man, 2 and 3 Black women after me. But I was aggressive. Every time we had people to interview, I called every single person who was offered an interview at UCLA. And if they were a person of color, I was meeting with them. I was doing dinners. I was making sure to ensure that they knew that if they came here, I can't guarantee what their training experience would be like, but I can guarantee that I will show up for them however, like in what capacity that I had, I would be there for them.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Wow. And how, first of all, I guess we didn't even talk about this. What is a urologist, right? So a simple question. What is urology? Because even as a medical professional myself, urology is kind of, it's like ophthalmology. It's one of those because you guys even have a separate match. You guys are very special. Very special.
I think it's a created sense of specialness. Like we're all special. Yeah. Everyone has value. Everyone brings value to the table, regardless of what you do. We all have the capacity to bring value to the table. And within medicine, that's true too. I don't think there's any specialty that supersedes another. There is the culture, like, oh, the surgeons walked into the room, look at them and whatnot. And that, I think that mindset can be dangerous because it undervalues the work that everyone else does, the nurses, the tech. It's when we're in the operating room. If I have a medical student, you're going to get a long lecture from me before you step into the operating room with me about treating people, seeing people, and referring to people by name is really important. But I digress. You asked about urology. So, urology, I didn't know what it was till my third year of medical school.
Yeah, I think
didn't know what the word meant.
I think that's most people, and that's in medical school.
I was a medical student. I had no idea because during anatomy, when we had the pelvic dissection, it was around the time of the holidays. So my group didn't get to do the pelvic dissection. So we just skipped over. They're like, oh, you don't need to know that part. You just we're not going to test you on this. Right. So we just kind of moved on. And most medical students of color that I speak to, because I try and get my face out there in the medical school, particularly for the students of color, I did a ton of mentoring and speaking at their, if they had anything that required resonance, because I wanted people to see that the women who in surgery, the women of color in surgery, and to explain what urology was. A lot of them thought urologists were nephrologists. So, or they thought that we were the male gynecologists, So I remember when I told my mom I was going to do this, she was like, so you went all the way to the United States to be a penis doctor. And I said, yes, mommy. So what we do is we're surgeons for the kidney, bladder, and prostate. So the genitourinary system. So you think about your kidneys, they're connected to the bladder by things called ureters, and then the urethra is where you pee through. We also are surgeons for anything that's below the pelvic bones. So the general surgeons do all the bowel stuff, with the exception of someone like myself. I'll get to that in a second. But we do deal with everything on the pelvic floor because you need to have support so that your guts don't fall down through the ground.
Right.
And we do all that reconstruction. So in residency, I could be doing kidney stones one day, or actually in the same day, take out a kidney tumor. I could do a kidney transplant. I could take out a bladder. I could put in a penile prosthesis, and I can take out sperm for someone's infertility. I could have a child come in for a circumcision one day, and then I could do, I'm trying to think of I could do prolapse, a woman who has laxity of the pelvic floor from vaginal deliveries. I could do a gunshot wound, the abdomen that went through the bladder, I could repair that, or I could do a fistula from, someone who had cancer and radiation.
Right.
So there's such a breadth in terms of the pathology that we deal with, the patient population that we deal with. And I would hear like, oh, but don't you take care mostly of men? I was like, well, women have kidneys too. They have bladders too. So, take care of both.
Right.
So we don't take care just of men. We do both. And, so I chose to then go into neuro-urology and pelvic reconstructive surgery. And it's such a fun part of urology. I tend to tell people in medicine that it's plastic surgery for the genitourinary system. So we reconstruct. If you have an injury or a malformation or having issues with voiding, we take your pre-existing anatomy, we kind of look at what you have and how can we rearrange things to give you, this is my favorite part, the best quality of life. So we're not dealing with cancers, but we're here to ensure that, so nothing is emergent. So you were talking about how the surgeon's life, like patients come in and you can't delay. I can. So it's quality of life surgery. There's nothing in my field that is truly an emergency.
Right.
And there's a lot of thinking about, this is the part that really harkens back to my palliative care days. We have discussions about what's important to you, what's most bothersome to you. So it's not like you're leaking urine, let's fix it. You might not care about the leakage of urine, or you might say it's the fact that I have to wear a pad, but we might not have to do a surgery to fix that. We can do other things to fix that. And so really getting a good understanding of the cause of bother of a patient and what their goals are, and trying to ensure that anything that we do maximizes quality of life. So we tend to have long-term relationships with patients, and we tend to do, you could be a urologist who never operates and you'll still have a great practice, because we do a lot of clinical medicine. You could be a urologist who only operates, and you could be a urologist who does a ton of procedures. And I liked that because I knew I was going to have a family. I like the big wide cases. So the cases that I do, I'm taking bowel and making new bladders out of them. I am putting artificial urinary sphincters in people who leak so that now they don't leak, they're dry. I'm helping women with incontinence or people with prolapse. And so, or like reconstructing the connection between the ureter and the kidneys. So in a given day, I could do a robotic surgery, an open surgery, a microsurgery, and all of them are targeted towards improving the quality of life of our patients. And that's just such a magical thing.
Quality of life is something that's really important to me, I think. And actually, it's part of my post-training aspect of the way I practice that I think I'm developing I'm being a little bit more mindful about. So what is important to the patient is becoming, I'm slightly ashamed to say it's becoming now more important to me as well. I think a lot of the way we are trained is goal oriented, but it's not always patient goal oriented, right? It's always, there's something to do, let's execute X. It's not often that we get to actually, we say it, we incorporate, it's shared decision making.
Put that in your notes.
I know we say it.
Yeah.
But it's really Inception, right? Like the movie, we we kind of, but I'm trying to be more mindful, and I'm being very deliberate about being mindful about making sure those goals align with what the patient really wants. And I'll give you an example. I'll have patients in the pulmonary clinic who have end stage, say COPD, something like that. And something as simple as, I just want to be able to, so the question I always ask then is, how can I help you the most, right? Something like that, some variation of that. And an answer as simple as, I just want to be able to like go to my mailbox and come back. That's all I want. Or I just want to go outside and watch my grandkids play, something like that.
Yeah.
And then all the other things that I had to fix are no longer problems, right? All the other things that I'm trained to fix are no longer issues. The main goal is now the main goal, and keeping the main thing. And that's a part of my training that I'm trying to kind of keep cultivating as I'm growing in this field. You strike me as a lifelong. I know we say this in medicine. Medicine is a lifelong endeavor in learning, something like that. You strike me. I mean, you're all over the place. But and I say that with absolute respect and admiration. But you're all over the place with intent and with like tremendous execution, right? So like we spoke about French. You did chem. You're doing your master's now. What's your master's in?
In health professions education.
Right, and you gave us a talk today on personal advocacy. Self-advocacy, right? And we kind of touched about how you incorporated that and making sure you're reaching out to mentorship. How does that tie in with your medical practice for your standard practitioner out there?
You mean self-advocacy specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, everyone should practice self-advocacy. The presentation that I gave, I showed a picture of Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. And there's a scene where he comes and he asks for more. And yes. And in that screenshot, I just learned how to do GIFs or GIFs or whatever people call it. And so I had a ton of them in my presentation, including this one. And he's like lifting up the bowl. And there's a kid in the corner looking, and you can tell that he's like, oh, this is awkward. Like, I don't, like, should I be watching? Should I not? Because I'm uncomfortable. Obviously, the person doing the ask is uncomfortable. And the person listening to the ask might be indignant. They may be uncomfortable to like receive it because now you've put them in the position where they have to say no, or they have to pretend they're going to do the thing that you asked them. So there's a lot of discomfort around asking. And then additionally, we are in such a place of privilege to be in medicine. You're in top 1%, and, you can't have this woe is me, help me because like I'm so behind in life, because how many people get to be in this space? And so sometimes I think that what ends up happening is we misuse gratitude to say that we're not deserving of requesting anything more, because how grateful should we be? Like you've gone so much, you don't deserve to ask more. Look at the chap over there. So I think that sometimes that stops us from asking. And then there's also the fear of retaliation. What happened to Oliver Twist? He got sold. So, so you ask, and then your chair calls you into the room after like you went to go ask someone a question to some other person in a different department. So I hear that you set up a meeting with, nephrology over there. Tell me about that. So I think that there is a stigmatization of asking. And one of the things I shared at the conference is a saying of my mother. Like, a lot of my wisdom is not mine. It's my mother's, by the way. Shout out to Mama Ruth. And she says, closed mouths don't get fed. And she always follows it up with a fancy statement that is buewano, which means open your mouth. And I used to hate it when she said that. And she used to say it because I'm naturally very soft-spoken. So it's work for me to speak like this and, project and seem all confident, because I normally just want to be like that. Right. That's my natural state. And I think that you're not, like, if you don't ask, you'll never get. Ask and it shall be given unto you. And the worst that will happen, quite frankly,
is no.
The other scenarios, they don't respond if it's an email. You don't lose anything. So I send cold emails, probably weekly. I'm like, oh, I found this thing that's interesting. I read a paper. I can't tell you the number of papers I've read, and I've just messaged the first author or the corresponding author, because I was like, that sounds so great. Can I meet with you? Tell me more. Just want to hear you talk. So I'm constantly meeting with people who have different mindsets as me, because there's no good hearing from many other Chantals. That's just like an echo chamber. But I'm constantly meeting with people in engineering and education and industry, or folks in other surgical specialties. And usually I'm like, I saw this product of yours, or I heard you give this speak, or I read this little thing that you wrote. I just want to hear about your story and kind of hear about that messaging. You'll be surprised at the number of people who are like, yeah, like, you want to meet with me? Sure. And people like to hear themselves talk.
Of course.
So I know I'm doing a lot of talking now, but most of the time I'm the listener, and you learn so much.
I definitely, part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is because if it's more than a part, it's probably the core part, the core tenet of it is I've always felt that there's much more behind the titles. Your mother didn't name you doctor, right? Your name, you are who you are before you were any of these other things, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I hold very dear to me. And when you mentioned how you essentially you educate your medical student about call people by their name, that is important to me, right? Everyone has a story. Everyone has something that makes them truly special, truly unique. And it's not, you don't have to be the person to see it, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, no one else has to see it, but it's important sometimes. I think the point of stories, and we all have stories, is that they're shared. And someone out there will hear, even if it's just one person.
Yeah.
And that becomes an inspiration. I'm also reflecting on when you mentioned like reaching out to see if there's anyone else like you. And I'm hoping that there's some, I don't know, medical student out there that might watch this, and a young Black medical student out there that might watch this and was contemplating urology, and in 5-10 years from now is a urologist because of hearing your story. That's awesome. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah.
So are you in public speaking as a thing, or is that just a phase you're going through right now?
No, I've done public speaking since I was a kid. Again, my mother, bless her heart, it was very important to her that we enunciated properly. So I, constantly would read out loud, being able to communicate in spaces. Like when I was a kid, I was giving speeches in my, elementary school. So I've had a lot of practice at being able to communicate my story. And I meet with students all the time, and I tell them, particularly when they're trying to transition from college to medical school applying to residency, I tell them the world is going to constantly want to tell you who you are. If you create a void and you just show up in a place, they're going to look at you and like, oh, you look like someone who's from this background, or this might be your story. But you have to tell the world who you are. And to that end, it's important that you know your narrative and you have a way of communicating that. Because if you don't, best believe they'll be making up a story. Oh, you're a Black girl. Oh, you must have had it really hard. They don't know my story. They don't know the privilege that I've experienced. They don't know the disadvantage I've experienced until I tell them. They don't know the things that led me to come down this path. Oh, you must have had, you might see a white male and say, oh, your father or your grandfather, you must have had access to medicine. It might be someone who's first generation. They don't know your story.
Right.
There are lots of assumptions. And the narrative humanizes you. Right, especially for someone who's high achieving, I think I've gotten to the point where people see me and they're like, oh, she was like, oh, and I share my failures a lot, particularly with people coming behind me, because I think it's important for people to recognize that we all stumble and fail. It's what you do with that, and it's human to fail. So one of the things I encourage for those who do the cold emailing like I do is, it's not a one-time interaction. If you're fortunate that someone responds, keep that line of communication constantly. I'm not saying badger people, but set a cadence. And I've been doing this since after high school. I'm not sure why I started it, but I've been doing it definitely through college and medical school. And medical school, it was every 3 months. I sent an email to all my mentors. And these were people oftentimes that I had connected with in some capacity somehow. And I'll give them an update on what's going on in my life. Oh, I just finished, my chemistry class. So I just came back from studying abroad. And I say initially, well, first and foremost, it has to be an email directed to an individual. Don't send a group email, because someone will say, oh, Charlie will respond, Sally will respond, no one responds. Started off with something that's specific to that individual. So how was that conference you told me you were going to, or how's your kid? Something that they know that you wrote this email for that individual. Now, if you're in training, you probably don't have that much time. So the rest of the email can be copy paste. So, but the beginning, it's important that it's personalized, and you give them an update. Initially, when you're building that relationship, you want to share updates and wins, because people don't want to hitch their horse to a wagon to their losing horse, is the expression. So if they like see that, yeah, you seem like it's like, is she gonna swim? Is she gonna sink? I don't know.
She's faltering over there.
They might slowly back out. They're like, oh, I don't know you that well. So that's the girl that emailed me, but I don't really know her. So you want to ensure that you are building a narrative of someone who has the potential for success. It doesn't mean you won't fail. And once you've established relationship, I always start sharing failures. I don't over-explain the failures. No one wants to hear a sob story. I state it. And then you want to provide insight. This happened, and I think it's because X. Just keep it at that, because you want to show that you understand why that failure happened so it doesn't happen again. So you're not going to be in this perpetual cycle. And what are you going to do about it? You don't want to dump the problem in your mentor's lap or that person and be like, okay, fix me now.
Right.
You want to at least have it doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out plan, but you can say, I failed a class. I think I wasn't quite understanding the importance of this aspect of the curriculum. I'm getting a tutor every Friday, plain and simple. And I always end the email with an ask. And this is the part that I think is important, because you want that person to do some homework. You want them to think about you. You want them to send another email. You want them to respond with a paper, something, because over the course of time, now that person has been emailing you for 6 years. And when you call them and you say, hey, can I have a letter of recommendation? They know the arc of your journey. They didn't just meet you as a PGY1 and then you resurface as a PGY5. Additionally, you know that you've like, okay, we're in the same team, and they start using we language. They're like, where are we applying to fellowship? I'm like, you're not applying anywhere, it's just me. But I'm like, we are applying to FERS. The we language shows you that they feel like they are part of your village.
Right.
And then they start forwarding you things or opportunities. They may not necessarily do anything active, but they might get an email that comes to them and they're like, oh, this might be in line with Chantal's interest. And then they FYI. I get so many FYI emails. But the reason is they have a sense of your interest and your trajectory and your goals, and they can now send you resources that are appropriate to you. They can't send resources to every single individual who has ever reached out to them, but you've created a narrative of this is where they're going, and they get this email. It's not relevant to them, but they can push it over to you. And they can help write, like they can pick up the phone and actually tell a story about you, not, oh, I know this resident, she's really great. Crickets. I know this resident, she's really great. She's working on this project and, she has this publication. She is planning on doing XYZ in the next 5 years. That is very different from I know this resident.
Right.
So I definitely think there's an intentionality. If you're going to do the whole reach out thing and cold email, it requires some investment and some building of relationship.
Right.
And that's something that I try and encourage my mentees to do. But it requires a strong understanding of who you are and the ability to communicate that to someone else so they're not putting labels on you, because the world is going to do that. Don't let them.
Wow. That's very insightful. Are you on social media?
I am, begrudgingly. Very rarely check anything. But I did join Twitter because I wanted to avail myself to students of color who wanted. So that's the only reason why I joined. And I get a lot of people reaching out to me that way. I very freely share my email and my phone number. So students reach out to me all the time, or people in the continuum of training. So yeah, that's really the only thing I use it for.
And the reason I'm asking is because I have social media. Predominantly my primary social media is Twitter, X. And I feel like there is really something developing with the way Twitter is being used for medical education. And I love it. Yeah. I love it. The way the access to people has changed dramatically. Like, so, and the reason I brought it up just because of the way you're describing that kind of cold outreach. Yeah. It's one of the, when someone publishes a paper and they post it on Twitter, you can respond right there or send them a DM. I guess that's the millennial. I guess I'm a millennial, huh? I guess that's a millennial email now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I love using Twitter for that. As a professional they can use that as a professional means of engaging with people, learning new things. It's one of my favorite ways to do it.
Agree.
Yeah. I wanted to say, so I want to ask, how long is your fellowship?
It's
This
2
fellowship?
years.
And you're in year
One.
Year one. Okay, so you just started in May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in July.
July. Where is that fellowship?
University of Michigan.
University of,
Yeah, I know.
is that Detroit? Where is University of Michigan?
In Ann Arbor, which is about 45 minutes from Detroit.
Detroit is, the state of Michigan is having a really good year.
Is it?
Yeah, the Lions are playing very well for the very first time in a very long time.
You're talking to the wrong person. I don't know what you're talking about.
And Michigan.
Yes, that I know about.
Michigan won the.
I went to work and everyone was wearing blue and yellow and they're like full of pride. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of where you want to go after?
It's the $1 million question. I don't know. I know a couple of things. Wherever it is that I go has to be a place that my husband feels that he can thrive to, because he's a Cali boy, born and raised in California, didn't think the world had any other locations outside of California. And I woke up one day and I said to him, I think I need to go to Michigan. I was a PGY4, so I had a good 3 years ahead of me. And he laughed and he was like, hell no. And then in part because I woke him up to tell him that. It was poor timing, but I woke up and I was like, hey, babe, I think I need to go to Michigan. And I didn't have a reason. I just woke up one day. So I prayed about it. And I started looking at like, what's up with this place? I didn't know anything about the place. I knew what I wanted to do specialty wise. And as I started to explore it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the place to go. And then I also knew that I wanted to be able to continue doing my research. So I think I explained a little bit. My research looks at barriers to access to careers in medicine for underrepresented medicine. And I'm looking at the whole continuum from medical school. So those who are applying to medical school, those who get accepted, those who graduate, and those who apply into urology, those who don't match. I'm like doing a lot of quantitative, qualitative studies. And I have a ton of data from AAMC, from our Urological Association. But not every place cares about that kind of work. And I wanted to go to a place where people are like, yeah, like this is important. Let's talk about it. Let's brainstorm. I wanted to go to a place where I could continue to like play with ideas. People not just agree with me. And people say, have you thought about it this way? Have you considered doing this? Like I presented at our health services research meeting and they tore apart my research and I was like, yes.
This is
and
what I
like,
want.
your word. But this is exactly what I want. People who are critically thinking as they listen to you and they probe so they can find the holes, so that when I meet people who actually don't care about this work or actually actively against this work, I already have answers because I got some practice. So it became more and more apparent to me that I need to go to Michigan because this is a place where I will thrive. And I have such a sense of fulfillment right now.
That's amazing.
But going back to my husband, he eventually, like, so once I learned more and I explained to him why this is the place I could go to, he's like, let's go visit. He bought his first winter coat and he bought the tickets and we flew out here. This was a number of years ago. So mind you, this like still had 3 more years of residency. Right. And we came and we explored and he was like, I can do this. And I was like, can I do 3 years? He was like, absolutely not. So I'm doing a 2-year program instead. But he believed in my vision. He believed in my potential and he came here with me. I was going to say no questions asked, but that's a big lie. Many questions asked, but just such a, there was such
support.
It's just a belief in who God had called me to be that sometimes superseded my belief in myself. And so in order to honor him, I said to him, wherever we go next, you get to choose. Because ultimately, I can practice medicine anywhere. There's not enough urologists. I would like to practice in an academic center, and I would like to go to a place, like there are things that I would like to do. But like I said to you, I'm at heart, I'm a caregiver. I can care for people anywhere. My family is not going to be a casualty in the pursuit of career and success. Because success for me is not defined by a lot of things that people tend to define it.
Do you feel like in this, there's certain subspecialties, the more you subspecialize, it becomes more academic, understandably.
For sure. What I'm in is one of those.
I was about to ask you, yeah. Is it, so it is more academic.
It is.
Well, that will give you an opportunity then to create a space wherever you are.
Yeah.
To make something out of that.
Yeah. I think that I'm so fortunate to be in a position where I have options. And sure, there might be like, maybe there's a place where like, gee, I want to go there. They may not have an opening. It doesn't mean that the world is over there. I'm going to be able to take care of patients somewhere. Sure, I might want to go to a place where they give me like 50% research time and with a statistician and all that stuff. But you can still do the work if it's, you're not going to get everything in your checklist. It's not going to be perfect. But my home life is not going to be compromised as a result of my career pursuit. So I think that there's always going to be a give and take, and trying to navigate that. So we're still exploring options.
Well, that's the nature of any healthy relationship, to be fair.
Absolutely.
What's the future looking like? Motherhood.
Yeah, we have a 1-year-old kid. She is sweet but feisty, and so I'm learning a lot in terms of boundaries, because I tend to. So I'll give you an example. I can work through the night. I'm a night owl, and I can stay up all night. But if my child decides, this actually happened this week, if she decides that she's going to wake up and need some TLC, and I didn't go to bed earlier, then I'm like destroyed in the morning. So I'm learning. I haven't gotten there yet in terms, like, I need to take care of myself so I can take care of her. I also used to be that person who just overstayed at work. It's like, oh, let me just do that one more email. I'm going to round on this patient again. I'm going to check with the residents. I want to do this. And I can't do that because I have to go pick her up from daycare. Like that's the thing. Like I have to pick her up from daycare.
That's a hard stop.
Yeah. So it's a hard stop with no negotiables. I do push the limits sometimes, not going to lie, but we get there before the daycare closes, and I don't do any work between when I pick her up and she goes to bed. So I do dinner with her. I play with her. I do dinner with her. I do bath time. I read a book. She goes to bed. So that's like from 6 to about 8:30 is my child's time. Occasionally I've had some work dinners around that time, and my husband actually teaches at night. So I've taken her with me. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this visiting professor, and my child is just going to be right here. And it's, we do the thing.
Are you the mother you thought you'd be?
No. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I decided on surgery, I cried. I called my mother and I cried, and I said, Mommy, I'm going to be a terrible mother. Oh. And she said, you don't have a child. What are you talking about? She's like, what is your problem? There was no empathy. She was like, where is the child, the hypothetical child?
What is this problem?
She's like, come on, package that away. So then I got to shelf that concern because I didn't have a child, and I was like, okay, don't even know if I'm going to get into medical school, because now they're telling me that I can't get scholarships and they don't want internationals and all that stuff. So I was able to put that in the back burner, and then I got married, and I was like, oof, children. I know I want to have children, but what's this motherhood going to look like? So I had to reimagine what motherhood looked like. And I think that especially as she gets older, she starts to remember things. I have a feeling I'm going to grapple a lot with guilt of not being present, because my mother was present for everything. She knew all my friends' parents. She was my best friend. She knew all the dance moves. She knew all the songs. My mother was a cool mother, and she was present. She came to ballet. She took me to taekwondo. My mother was like all up in my grill, and I loved it. And I'm not going to be that mother. I don't do drop-offs in the morning because I'm in the OR. My husband does drop-offs. But, and today I was gone to a conference, and my husband was with her all day. I actually haven't seen her today. So I'm going to see her after this interview. Ooh. But when I'm with her, I give her 100%. And I'm hoping that is good enough. I don't know.
I have the strongest of senses that it's going to be more than enough. I really, really feel so. Also, I think kids, and I'm learning this as well, appreciate the quality in ways that it's unremarkable. I think they appreciate sometimes one of my favorite things about my kids is sometimes they're just there, and that is quality time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I feel they feel the same way about me, because there are times when I can go a few days and not get to see them. Yeah. And when they do see me, the briefest of moments, my daughter will say, "Oh, Dad, I missed you yesterday," something like that. And then if I walk in and she, oh my goodness,
The excitement.
Oh,
Yes.
oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
My kid now is doing this.
Yeah,
It's
that's
so
amazing.
cute. Yeah.
So what? And after that, what's next? So our question I always ask my guests. So in a year, 5 years, 10 years, where do you see? And a lot of that can be as vague as possible.
Yeah.
But what is the clearest picture that you have?
In a year, I'm still going to be in fellowship.
Yeah.
So I'm still there. But I will know where I'm going afterwards. And I'm a planner. So it's nice to have a sense of like, this is where you're going, because I know myself, I'm going to start building, like trying to build community virtually and reaching out to people and trying to like a mentorship team and all that stuff, trying to establish as much as I can before I get there. So I think that's probably going to be, there's going to be a lot of relief from having a benchmark or a destination for the next spot. And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing with regards to just empowering people around me. Like today just fills my cup. In 2020, when COVID happened and there was the murder of George Floyd and the world shut down, I was frustrated. I was frustrated in the medical community. I was frustrated at the silence. Like, no, I came home, my husband and I were like crying and we were upset and distraught. And I went to work and everyone was like, do. That's what it felt like. They may not have been feeling do, but I was feeling like that's what they were feeling. And no one spoke about it for weeks. And then eventually one unsuspecting attending came up to me. I was like, "Hey, Chantal, how are you doing?" I was like, "Do you really want to know how I'm doing? Let me sit you down." And he happened to, we were in the county and we sat down for lunch. And I think I just like spoke at him for an hour about the state of this country and the history. And mind you, I didn't grow up here. So a lot of the underlying tensions and disparities and ugliness of racial relationships were foreign to me. I know occasionally you will feel like something here, something there, but a lot of the ugliness, the underbelly of it was foreign to me. And I started educating myself voraciously. I can't tell you the number of books I've read and the number of talks I've gone to. I will never understand it like someone who's been here. And when I say been here, I don't mean like just born here, like been here, generationally experienced this thing. But I had a curiosity and I wanted to know. And I felt like there was a sense of like, oh, I don't want to see that. Sort of like the kid in the picture from Oliver Twist. And I demanded my department look at itself. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, once they realized that they couldn't pretend that it was happening, they're like, okay, let's make this panel and let's like go out into the community and let's go do this outreach and let's like make this plan. Everything was so external. And I was like, oh, no. Let's look here. What are you doing? What conversations are you having with your children? What conversations are we having in this department? What are you doing? Put a mirror to your face. Kind of like demanded that of the department. And now I've actually lost my train of thought. I'm not sure where I was going with all of this.
The underbelly.
The underbelly. Yeah, but there was a reason why I went to this trajectory. Lost my train of thought. But
it's okay.
That's kind of what led to my research. And so in the next year and the next 5 years, I hope to be able to continue to create space now I remember. So in that chaos, I tried to create community virtually. And that looked like creating a community on Twitter, so folks in urology. But one of my very good friends and mentor, Chantal Wilson, so she is a practicing urologist. She put together a WhatsApp group of Black urologists across the country. And I like to think that I contributed in terms of trainees and getting people plugged in. And so we made this WhatsApp group. And all of a sudden you're hearing about people's experiences at these different institutions and like, things with patients, things with their faculty, or things with like promotions. And like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not, sometimes you feel gaslit. Like, this is real, and I'm not the only one experiencing it. So in the next year and the next 5 years, I hope to be able to, create space, for people to be able to share, and also like promote people, sponsor people. Today was really fun because I got to meet people who I'd connected with on WhatsApp and have never met in 4 years. We've emailed, we've talked, we've cried, we've like shared wins. And then I'm like meeting them for the first time, like, oh my gosh, I give them a hug. Like, I've always known you, but I've never felt you.
Right.
And so I think that, next year, next 5 years, continue to build that community, continue to do my research, because I get to hold the data to people who are like, show me the data. I'm like, yeah, I got you. Show you the data. And also I want to switch from describing to interventions. So, okay, we've described the problem. We know there's a problem, there's a representation problem. And that's a numbers game that I think people can fix very easily. But the inclusion problem, they're like, how do you exclude me by not talking about things that I understand, by talking about like hockey, which I'm never going to be interested in. Trust me, I'm not going to pretend. I did for the first 3 years of residency. I used to look up the interests of my attendings in addition to learning about the case and learning about my patients. So I have something to chat with you about in the operating room.
Wow.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah, that's a lot.
If we're doing a 5-hour case and I'm trying to remember all these stats about these teams that it was a lot. And then I stopped. I was like, I can't do this. It's 2020. I was tired. And I stopped. Then you become the person who doesn't engage, and you're not a team player, and you're not trying, and you seem like, then they start asking you questions like, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. We can help you transfer to a different program. We can help remediate you. We can help you get psychological support. I'm like, I'm not crazy. I'm not stressed. I just don't want to talk about hockey. So creating spaces where people feel like it's okay to be your authentic self. It's like, if you want to listen to Beyonce in the OR, we'll have lots to talk about. But if you're listening to some, heavy metal that I don't know anything about, I don't relate to. Yeah. So in terms of interventions and things that we can do, I think people overplay the diversity representation thing because it's a numbers game, and it's an easy fix if there's intentionality. Some people just don't want to do that.
Right.
But it's an easy fix if you wanted to. So I have a lot of projects around the match and like how like people use numbers, and I'm like, you could fix this. The inclusion thing requires I see you as a person who has a history, a story, and interests, may or may not be in alignment with ours. I want to hear more. Or if you come to me and you say, I didn't quite like that interaction, or what you said kind of, did something negative to me, I'm not going to be like, oh, like I'm not trying to be racist. I'm not trying to be, no one's accusing you of anything, but can we have a conversation about how interactions are not always positive? And, we can have a conversation, we can move past it. But the moment you create a situation where people feel as if they can't even have a conversation, you start to like then keep your professional mask on. I'm not going to take it off because you can't handle it. I'm not going to come to work with my afro because I don't want you to touch it. I'm going to be my urologist with my white coat. I'm not going to be Chantal. So that I think is really interesting, powerful work, and it's a space that I kind of want to get into. Year 5.
You are an inspiration.
That's very kind.
Yeah, quite remarkable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you for having me.
I certainly hope you keep coming back to New Orleans so we can have this can be our follow. We can have our a follow-up episode. Like where are we next?
I'm gonna keep coming because I love the Joneses.
They are very lovable. They're supposed to be on the podcast, but they've been ducking me.
Is that why they asked you to?
they've been ducking me. Both of them have been ducking me. But it's okay. I'm gonna get them.
They're solid people, good heart, and I think for young people who are married, and we all have struggles. I think oftentimes people try and put their like perfect lives on social media. It's nice to have people who are in a similar stage of life who you can share the lows and the highs with. Like my husband and I were talking to them about some of the difficulties of being married to medicine, is what my husband calls it. It's like, married to medicine. But we can have those honest conversations without shame and without judgment and without a sense of, I'm going to go home and be like, you told them that, we did this. We have a very... our marriage is such that, and it's such a blessing that we over communicate, and we have communities of individuals such as Dr. Jones and Dr. Jones that we can be honest with and share authentically and not be judged for it. And it's it injects life into a marriage. I hope everyone who is in such relationship has that kind of community. I think it's vital.
Everyone deserves a village.
Everyone deserves a village.
Everyone deserves a village. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. That was amazing.
Yay.
That was awesome.
I'm a talker. I'm very verbose.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Last Zebra. We have new episodes available on Monday mornings on all of your podcast platforms, and new episodes are also available on YouTube on Tuesday mornings. Please like, comment, subscribe, and engage with our listeners, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at the next episode.